Well, hello everyone. It is Friday, July the 22nd, 2022. I am Dale Dalbridge, Benchmark Realty, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. This is your status chat. Tell me, do we have cash for clunkers? Welcome to my video, Cash for Clunkers. And I'm going to get to that later in the video because I want to use macroeconomics. I know it's about as exciting as watch paint dry, but I want to use macroeconomics to look at what has happened in the past, what is happening now, what's likely to happen in the future. But first I want to say, click subscribe to this video channel and hit the notification bells if you want to see videos like this, because I am different from a lot of people out there. Now, I may run long, I expect to run long on this, so let's get to it. How many of you people know what the DSM-5 is? It's not something that comes up in normal conversation. It's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual in mental health issues. Now, PTS, or post-traumatic stress, is very real, and it's one of the requirements in the DSM-5 is you have to have a fear for your life, a loss of life. And where that comes from is we know through medical science that if we bathe our brains in certain stress hormones and chemicals, that if we don't let our brains breathe and flush that stuff out, if we don't let them take a deep breath, our brains can receive some level of damage from this chemical stimulus. What have we just gone through? Well, we went through a situation where they were saying we have no value, we're not essential, stay home, shut up, wear your mask, 20 million people is going to die, we're working on as hard as we can, trust us, trust us, trust us. And the end result was, of not working for a year, a great number of Americans lost their nest egg. They have no safety net right now. What do you think that does to their stress level? Now, I'm going to leave that there and come back to this because I need to speed up and say, what do we have going on? How many times have we heard in our lifetime, stimulus, we have to spend the money, we have to spend the money, we have to do this to save the economy, we have to blow out the budget to save the nation. And they tell us that, and we go, oh, okay, because we're stressed and we're just trying to survive. Well, let's look at some economic theory. Here we have from Investopedia, Velocity of Money, James Chen, reviewed by Charles Potters, fact-checked by Susan, and I'm not going to insult her by trying to pronounce her name. What this is going to talk about is this one concept in macroeconomics called the velocity of money. Did our stimulus speed up our economy? Well, according to this, right here, the velocity of money is usually measured as a ratio of the GDP and to a M1 or M2 money supply. Okay? It's how much gross domestic output. Simple terms, it's what is the dollar value of our country's internal goods and services in a fiscal year. That's the GDP. And we know that the M1 and M2 are some kind of a money supply. I'm going to use the M1 in just a second. And it says right here, the velocity of money is measurement of the rate at which money is exchanged in an economy. Very similar to that is this right here where we talk about the formula. The formula of the velocity of money is the rate at which one unit of money supply currency, that's a US dollar, being transacted for goods and services in the economy. Well, I want you to imagine I'm holding a dollar here. This is Bob the dollar. Okay? Bob the dollar. The velocity is how many pockets, relatively, is how many pockets Bob hops in a year. All right? Does Bob hop in 4 pockets or 5 pockets or 2 or 1? How many pockets does Bob hop into? Well, what is the effect of that stimulus that we had to have to save the nation? We have to spend this money. What is the effect? Was it good for our economy? Were we told the truth? Printing all that money, did it stimulate the economy? Well, what printing money does is destroy the velocity of money. How does that happen? Because I still have the same number of pockets, i.e. our GDP has not changed. It's like the Titanic or the Enterprise, SS Enterprise. You don't turn that big puppy around on a dime. It will turn, but not instantaneously. Okay? So what happens when we still have the same 4 pockets we had before, but now I got Bob, and I got Fred, and I got Elmer out here. I got 2 other dudes out here chasing the same pocket. Let's go ahead and make it 4 and put Lisa out here. So now we got $4 chasing the same 4 pockets. What is the velocity when they each take a pocket? It slows way down. It's only 1/4. What does the formula tell us? The velocity of money divides the GDP by the money supply. Stimulus. Print that money. We got to have that money. So if I have whatever the GDP is, say 1 GDP, and I have $2, then the velocity of money is 2. Now if I print $8 because I quadruple it, now it's 1/8. Okay? We actually reduce the velocity of money. Printing money destroys the velocity of money. It tramples it. It sends it to the basement. Now you can increase the velocity of money a little bit if you put a little bit of money in the economy and it actually increases the GDP by the same or more amount. We say that that little bit of inflation is good when we printed that extra money. But think about if you're trying to buy a fixed quantity. Say you want to buy a lot of land. The lot of land, there's only so much. It doesn't change. So now we have $4 trillion in the economy. Okay. Now what happens when we take it to $16 trillion? Okay. There's a lot more bobs to fill that pocket that is the sale price of that 1 acre of land that you want to buy. So printing more money makes things more expensive. That's pretty simple. The next theory I want to look at is the quantity theory of money. Now, the quantity theory of money, I'm pulling from encyclopedia.com, and I'm going to skip all of it and get down to here where it says the QTM is written as MV equals PY. And we know that that says, boil it down, that is the gross domestic product equals the gross domestic product, because the gross domestic product can be represented as the price level times the output. It's also equal to the money supply times the velocity of money. Okay, now what did we see happens by the formula? The velocity of money tanks when we increase the money supply in the short run. Okay, if it truly stimulates the economy, we would see Y increase. But if the GDP is fixed and the output is fixed, because we can't, if I gave you $2 million, you couldn't turn it over the next day. It's going to take you time to build a factory or do something. So we cannot increase output instantaneously. So if Y is fixed, output is fixed, and if we don't change the velocity of money, then this would say that the money supply is the cause of inflation. Okay, let's look at that M1 that we referred back to. M1. Now we're going to go back to time. I've got it compressed a little bit, but all the way from 1960 and the full data we see it's pretty well much flat. We see the housing crisis right here in 2005 to 2010 is the last housing crisis, the last housing bubble. You can see because it's flat, the money supply wasn't the cause of it. It was something else. Okay, now what has happened? We talked about that little bit of inflation being good for an economy up to this point. Now here we are at January 2020 at $4 trillion. Make a note of that, if you will. $4 trillion, January 2020. Now here in May, five short months later, we have quadrupled the money supply. 5 months of the entire United States history, in 5 months, we have quadrupled the money supply. And we know that unless output increases, the money supply, when you increase it, it drives down the velocity of money. Bob ain't hopping but to one pocket because they got a lot of others. We have Albert and we had Lisa. Who else do we have in there? They're hopping in those other pockets. So the velocity goes to pot. Okay? What happened to cause this sudden increase in money supply? This is where I ask you, please do not flood the comments with a bunch of partisan stuff about fake pandemics and all that kind of stuff and cheated elections. None of that helped. I just want to do the macroeconomics, okay? So what happened in here? Well, this is what happened. This is from NPR. Look at the date, January 6th. The Democrats take control of the Senate with twin Georgia wins. And we see that these two seats kick the Democrats into control of the upper chamber. Now, this is where I got to talk about this. We have in our nation a bicameral system. Our Constitution says all spending bills have to come out of the House. The Democrats ran the House. They like to spend money. They like to write checks. You just saw the money supply. You know they like to write checks. They like to print money. Okay, but what will keep them in check was they weren't in charge of the upper chamber. Because to pass a law, you have to have both chambers, upper and lower, agree. January the 6th, the Democrats took the Senate. Now nobody is holding anybody's purse strings. And we see it in the M1. There we are at January. They've taken control, and in 5 months, we're 4 times the money supply. We haven't increased any output. In fact, we know that we've started a decrease in the GDP the first quarter of this year. And we're in a recession now. We're just waiting for the official second quarter to be released by the Fed. So we're in a recession now. We were in a recession back during the housing crash, but it wasn't a money supply issue. Now we have a money supply issue. We got too many dollars and nobody's taking them back. We see a little bit of a curve down as we start to get interest rates to rise. Now let's look at the prime rate. We were talking about the 80s, and we were looking at the Ford Carter years, followed by Reagan's recession. A recession is to an economy what chemotherapy is to a cancer patient. You almost have to kill the patient to cure the patient. We almost have to kill the economy to cure the economy. And we saw much, much higher rates. We saw double digits, 21% up here in December 19th, right before it peaked. And then we see it's come down, it's come down, it's come down. Now this is the bank loan rate historical data. Okay, we're seeing a little bit of spike. It doesn't look bad in terms of that. What about our mortgages? Well, our mortgages spiked back toward 1980, but you notice that it was after 80, they continued to spike all the way up into 81. And eventually they came down. So that's not a money supply issue, but it is an inflation issue, and it is a control issue. We see the 2005 to 2010 crash of the housing bubble. That was not a money supply issue, and we see mortgage rates falling. Mortgage rates now have ticked up. So the mortgage rates are not directly coupled to the housing crash here or the recession back here when we had to take such strong information. Where are we now? I call this cash for clunkers. Where are we right now? Well, this is a source I don't know if I can give you. It's DeKalb County, Rutherford County, entire MLS. This is the median price per square foot. Well, what's going to happen in housing if inflation hits? Well, if nothing else, ceteris paribus, if everything else remained the same, inflation is going to make the price per square foot skyrocket. Okay? And as long as people can close on the mortgages, the properties sell. Well, let's look at pricing. It also rose over time, but it starts to kick in about the time we're starting to print a lot of money because inflation has a lot to do it. Supply and demand has a lot to do it. The people coming in here has a part to do with it. So that's part of it. Well, why are we not in immediate fall off the cliff, panic mode in Rutherford County in our real estate industry? This is called the delinquency rate. Delinquency rates on single family mortgages. Okay? We see that we had the 2005 and we started seeing that rise in delinquency rates, but it wasn't scary until we started to see the bubble break and it skyrocketed up. We're not here anymore. We're down here. A parallel to the delinquency rates on single family homes, we have this other chart I want to show you. This is the charge-off rates. All right? Charge-off rates, that's the write-offs. If you go into foreclosure, they don't write it off until they close the books. So you have this process we call the equitable right of redemption. We can try to make it back. We can try to keep you from losing it. But it happens if you're late on loans, it's a sign of what's going on in your physical economy and largely to a greater extent ours. Now look up here. We are right in first quarter. We don't have second quarters yet. We expect them probably this week or next. We're at 1.4. That's a delinquency rate. Now look here. That's on all of them. That's including residential, commercial, and farmland real estate. But we were much, much higher back in 2017. Look at this. Down here to 3% delinquency rate, right? 4.0. 2015. We didn't have a housing bubble in 2015, but we had a high delinquency rate that resulted in a write-off of the loan. So what is this all about? Well, we looked at the past in macroeconomic terms. We saw that we had a massive problem about 1980 when we had massive inflation, that we had to have a tough recession to recover from. We see now that in the 2005 to 2010 rate area, right in that ratio, we had another recession and the money supply wasn't that. We see that home prices are still going up. We may have a little difference on days of market. I didn't show you that. but we're still selling. We're still selling well at this point in time. So what does cash for clunkers have to do with it? Well, to be quite honest, before we see a bubble break like 2008 through 2010, we had a run-up stage where things were pretty good. And then we started having the delinquencies and the lost properties and people losing out. We went through that recession and came out. We have something completely different now. We have an inflation problem caused by stimulus. We have an inflation problem that's the result of someone's out there quadrupling our money supply where we did not get a gross domestic product payoff. And what are we trying to do now in terms of controlling inflation? We're now raising interest rates to try to slow the economy. Imagine that. We're trying to cure the economy by slowing the economy. Because why? Because we got too many dollars just miracled up. Caveat, someone typed a computer. We quadrupled the money supply. Right now, we're in good shape. It looks like we are not about to have massive foreclosures. We're not delinquent on any of those. If we go back and look at that, even credit cards are not really delinquent. We're in good shape delinquency-wise, and we still have great job output. The July numbers show that we spiked inflation and still put out new jobs. So that encourages me to believe that we're going to start having some hyper kind of inflation and hyper increases right there in the beginning, kind of like we did in 1980, to try to control through the interest rates. We're going to try to control inflation because we're trying to kill the economy off, to slow it down, to cause some job loss, to slow down the number of bobs that are available out there to jump from pocket to pocket to pocket. And when that happens, if we start to have higher and higher interest rates, the inflationarily rose sales price values, there's not going to be anyone to reach up and get it because we won't have as many people who can fund that difference. We're not going to have people that can carry that note. Now, mortgages are written based upon mortgage-backed securities, not the prime rate. But it's our total economy that we're suffering through with this inflation that now has energy over 40%, a rise in energy over 40%. Tough times are likely to come, but they are not here yet. So what I think we're beginning to see in some of our real estate is we have a cash for clunker going on. What happened with cash for clunkers? COVID was great telling us what? We got to flatten the curve. Cash for clunkers deflattened the curve. It spiked the curve. It took the normal car sales. They spent money for Cash for Clunkers program to supposedly stimulate the auto sales. And all it did was take the people who would normally buy throughout the year and crunch them in a huge spike in a particular month. It didn't stimulate the economy. Printing money rarely stimulates the economy. Now, we do have the potential of a tough road to hoe, but right now we're okay. So if you can get a property, if you can sell a property or buy a property and you can hold on to it through what may be a tough time in the future, you haven't really lost anything unless you lose it, because historically our property values will come back up. So I don't know if this information is helpful to you. It's long-winded, but it's not pulled out of thin air, and I'm not just trying to sprinkle you with sunshine and lollipops, rainbow and lemon drops, and I'm not trying to scare you to death. I don't want you to have that PTS trauma where your brain is so keyed up all the time that the world is ending. It's not. You have a little time to prepare. Breathe. Take a breath. We're not off the cliff yet. We have some challenges, and we're yet to see what they do. So we may be much better off than it seems, but if we're not, you're forewarned, and forewarned is forearmed. Hello, I'm Del Delbert of Benchmark Realty, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. If you are currently unrepresented and would like to know how to compare up to 3 properties side by side and room by room, then go over to my new YouTube channel, Call Del to Sell. That's 1 L and Del, no spaces. Watch the demo on Real Scout, and then call me and we'll set up your exclusive ad-free account today. Now that all that is out of the way, last week, 7/15/2022, we had 14,705 opportunities in the Real Scout system. That is an increase over the previous period. We had 4,203 in the under contracts still showing that's actually a slight decrease over the previous period, and the ratio between the two was 29%. This week, Friday, 7/22/22, we have 15,131 opportunities in the Rail Scout system. That is an increase over the previous period, and 4,225 in the still showing under contracts. That was a slight increase over the previous period, but not significantly, and the ratio dropped further to 28%. You know what you have to do. You have to call Dell to sell, call Dell to buy. Dell does land, Dell does referrals. So call me. Have a great weekend.